Today's episode is brought to you by Malwarebytes Premium Security. Protect your computers and devices from cyber attacks 24/7 with Malwarebytes Premium Security. And go to malwarebytes.com/lock and code for an exclusive offer. That's malwarebytes.com/lock and code.
The idea of the internet being a private, free space, that was ingrained in its creation. And every platform since then sort of carried that spirit with it. And now, either due to legislation or due to greed or some other reason, those spaces are disappearing. And it's very difficult to just go like a cat video that your friend sent you, right? Like, it's very difficult to have a social interaction on a social media platform without it being a tool for selling you something or harvesting your data or some nefarious purpose like that.
This is Lock and Code, a Malwarebytes podcast. I'm your host, David Reese. Our main story today is about TikTok. On January 22nd, after a long legal battle, TikTok restructured itself so that its majority owners would be, for the first time, in the United States. You see, TikTok, with its reported 200 million plus users in the US, began in China in 2017, and that origin for years brought claims of national security risks. The claims were largely twofold. One, American lawmakers and government officials alleged that TikTok's Chinese ownership left Americans vulnerable to Chinese surveillance. All the data that we hand over when we use TikTok, like our names and email addresses, yes, but also our viewing habits, our interests, our behaviors, our political inclinations, maybe our locations, all of that, the argument went, should not belong in the hands of a foreign power. And that's because it left Americans vulnerable to manipulation. As FBI Director Christopher Wray said in 2022, the risk of TikTok was, quote, the possibility that the Chinese government could use TikTok to control data collection on millions of users or control the recommendation algorithm, which could be used for influence operations, end quote. We've largely ignored TikTok on this podcast because, truth be told, I've read the comments online whenever this topic comes up, and the defeatism is sky high. Here's an example. In 2024, Congress passed a law banning the availability of TikTok in the United States unless the company was sold to a new owner. That is what's happening right now, by the way. But that law was challenged, and in 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the law. And when that news broke, a lot of people on Reddit had a big attitude about how they didn't care. Here's what one user said, quote, TikTok doesn't have my social security number or bank account info. Why do I give a shit if scary China knows I watch pimple-popping videos or cats howling, end quote. Here's what another user said about their data, quote, I'd rather give it straight to the people that want it instead of having Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg sell it to the same people, end quote. And to that anonymous commenter, I say, with TikTok's new American ownership, you kind of got what you wanted, except you're not handing your data to China, you're handing it, loosely speaking, to another billionaire. And it's Larry Ellison, the co-founder and executive chair of Oracle, which is one of the new U.S. owners of the American TikTok. All of this raises the question, does American ownership of TikTok remove the previous alleged threat to national security? And even if it does American ownership of TikTok make Americans safer from corporate surveillance or American government manipulation? Today, to help us understand how TikTok's restructuring has visibly impacted people and the platform, we're speaking with Zach Hinkle, Senior Social Media Manager for Malwarebytes, and Minji Pei, social media content creator for Malwarebytes. Zach, Minji, welcome to the show.
Hey there. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, David. Wow, what a fun topic.
We are excited to have you both here because it is not often that we have, let's call you the folks, the ambassadors of TikTok. We have you on the show, and it's good because we can also talk about the actual experience, right, of posting and measuring and commenting and everything that comes with it, right? This isn't a conversation with folks who are just seeing something from afar. Your work is affected by this. And so I want to just jump right into it. I want to start on January 22nd, the actual day that TikTok changed ownership to its new American investors. Take me back to that week and help me understand what perceivably changed on the platform.
We've had a couple of periods with TikTok where something changed on the platform, and initially you're not really sure exactly what changed. You just know it's different now. Like, you can feel it. Back in 2025, when between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, during that transition, Biden had previously said, he wouldn't enforce the ban. He would leave that up to the incoming president to decide, how to enforce that, whether or not to even enforce that. And ByteDance, at the time the owner of TikTok, the U.S. operation in TikTok, ByteDance said, "Hey, look, voluntarily we're shutting down. The platform will not be available in app stores in accordance to the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act." Whew, that was passed. So when the platform went down in 2025, it was down for, a day or however long it was unavailable.
14 hours or so.
Right. Yeah. And when it came back, it was different. You could feel it then. The algorithm had changed. The content that would show up in your feed had changed. And when I say had changed, like, it's different. You were getting different content suggested to you that you weren't normally getting engagement on the content that you were posting. So us as a brand, as Malwarebytes, right? Like, our engagement over that 14 hours was totally different. The videos weren't being sort of fed out to audiences the way that they were before. And so you saw not just content creators, but brands as well, kind of scrambling to figure out what just happened. It's back, but it's not the same. It's like a Frankenstein scenario where, like, the thing that came back is not what it was before. It was really odd. And so this year, when ownership, ByteDance divests themselves of the U.S. operations, that's owned by Oracle, at least on the cloud side, and a consortium of others. It was different. So that day, I would say the biggest change that I noticed, and Minji, I'll hand it to you, but like, the biggest change was there were certain subjects, right? So TikTok had changed their terms of service when they changed ownership. Any content that was talking about that change in terms of service appeared to be repressed, right? That content wasn't getting the reach that your content previously would receive. And there were other keywords. We saw tons of, like, at Malwarebytes, where we're not talking about the Epstein files, but you would see other journalists would post screenshots of the word Epstein. If you sent a private message with the word Epstein in it, you would get an error message. Like, it would not send that message. So those two things specifically, day one, were immediately noticeable. Minji, what did you see?
Yeah, no, all of that, right? Like, there was just so many glitches. And again, like, we experienced that firsthand after posting a video about even the new privacy update and just having keywords in there as, text layovers such as privacy update and tracking locations. The content remained at 0 views. And normally, even viewing the video from my own personal account, it would count as an impression. But this time, even after liking, commenting, it still stayed at 0. And we also couldn't even tag a location. So yeah, like, users, they described their For You pages. It was dramatically different, right? Like, content about ICE, sexual assault, like essay cases, and just other politically sensitive topics just suddenly stopped appearing. And personally, for me too, even on my own personal feed, I noticed a similar shift too. And there's just so many glitches, and that not even just from our own brand side too, but many creators across every category, from food, beauty, of course, political commentary. They all said that they weren't able to post. And yeah, it was just weird. All the views were stuck at 0. Just seeing all older content popping up on your For You page. It was weird. It was weird.
I wanted to go back to something you said here, Zach, where journalists were reporting that even if they used the name Epstein in a private message, that they reported there would be an error that the message may not go through. Can you talk more about that? Because I think it also speaks to how much reach TikTok has into what we do.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the really interesting things, so there was sort of the immediate, the transition of ownership happens. Everyone is kind of figuring out what is going on and why is content not getting the reach that it did, and why does the For You feed look so different? And typically the way that the algorithm would work is content that you are interested in, and the way that it gauges that is by what you like, what you share, what you comment on, what you click into. TikTok is going to give you more of that. And so when you open up your feed the day after the transition happens, your feed is not giving you the content that you would normally engage with, right? So it's very apparent from day one. But like, the really interesting thing was TikTok sort of, got pressed on this question, like, are you censoring content? Are you the name Epstein, anything talking about the new terms of service and the data that you're collecting? And we can talk more about that here in a little bit. But like, TikTok was pressed on this and they said, oh, yeah, no, we're not censoring anything. This is due to, we have a data center, right? We have a power outage at a data center. And the funny thing is, those like journalists and other groups that are seeing the word Epstein censored, they could send a private message and talk about literally anything else, right? And what do you want to get for lunch? That message would go through, right? But the data center outage selectively doesn't let you send the name Epstein in a private message. Like that's kind of weird. I don't know. Like, we live in such an interesting time, right? Where conspiracy theories are abound, and depending on one's perspective, maybe some of these conspiracy theories prove to be true. And when you have these little moments with a social media platform where certain topics that are of importance to the new owners are being perceivably censored, it raises a lot of questions, perhaps unnecessarily, but like, if it smells like a pig, if it looks like a pig, right? Like it like, there are too many lines that too many dots you can connect.
Yeah, I think it's important here that you even mention, like, look, there's a world in which this is conspiracy theory stuff, but there's also a world in which, when you look at what is being tagged with an error, or what is resulting in an error, it is stuff that is politically fraught. It is stuff that is, for a very long time, social media platforms have struggled with how to moderate content about things like domestic violence, like sexual assault, and this just feels like it's continuing that pattern. And again, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. You can see, hey, these are things that have classically been surveilled or have classically been pushed against or stifled. I mean, look, all you got to do to believe that there's a plot here is like have watched one battle after another. Okay, like that's all like you really got to do. And you're like, yep, they're watching. That's how they get you. I wanted to move on to, as you said, Zach, there's a new terms of service. So I wanted to talk about, what does TikTok now know? Because again, with that ownership change, users did receive a new terms of service agreement, right? They open the app, they see something new about how the company would collect and use their data. I wanted to open up to both of you. What is covered in those new terms, and what, if anything, is actually different from before?
There's a few things, right? So previously, TikTok was only collecting approximate location based on your IP address, right? So generally speaking, that would give them, hi, Zach is posting a cat video from this IP address, and what TikTok would see is basically city level. They could see what I'm in San Francisco and I posted this cat video, right? The updated terms of service now give TikTok the access to collect more precise location based on GPS. So your GPS location beyond just your IP address. And that GPS location can be accurate within feet. So much more specific location data. And basically using location information and some of the more personal data, right? So the new terms of service extend to advertising outside of the app, right? So previously they would use personal data to tailor ads to you on the app. Now that goes beyond that. So one of the things that's really interesting too is, I think inevitably when you have a conversation about TikTok and data collection, right? That was initially the conversation that started this entire divestment of ownership. There was concern about what personal data China was collecting, how are they using it, where is it stored? Big important questions like that. And ownership then is transferred to a US company, and effectively what happens is they say, yo dog, we heard you were worried about data collection, so we put data collection in our data collection app. Like we multiplied it by 10. Like if you had data collection concerns before, oh boy, guess what? Like we're just gonna crank that dial now.
I wanted to dovetail that into something that you did, Minji, where you actually posted in reference to, again, the new ownership change. And you did something that was very, I think, it was required to be vague, right? You couldn't say new privacy policy. You couldn't say, look at these terms of service. So you had to kind of skate around. And you posted this kind of funny thing where it was like, is it worth it, right? Like I'm looking at these new terms of service agreements, and I'm, as a social media like content creator, I'm reconciling with my own relationship with the platform. But I also wanted to ask, just you personally, when you saw the new terms of service, did you have a moment of, is this worth it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's crazy, right? Because if you don't agree to all of those terms, if you don't agree to the app, to giving your data away, giving your location away, even down to what floor, what apartment you're like, what unit you're in, then you're blocked from the whole platform. You can't proceed. You can't move forward with it. So yes, I was very on the fence of this, but TikTok being my job, I mean, there goes my location. There goes the government knowing exactly where I am at all times. So yeah, I had to proceed with that. I had to press agree, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other users that use TikTok on the daily for their own business, for their own personal usage, they've all felt the same sentiment for sure.
I think it would be really easy here too, right? So a listener here hearing this conversation would be like, okay, easy. Like if you don't agree, then just like don't use the app. What's the problem, right? And the problem is if you wanted to delete your account and take all of your data out of TikTok, you can't do that until you agree to these new terms and services. If you wanted to go in and download your previous videos that you've posted to the platform and then never use the app again, you cannot do that until you agree to the new terms of service. So
it's agree to the new changes or get blocked from using the platform.
Absolutely. And even if you don't want to continue using the platform, just even to get to the point where you want to remove your presence from that platform, you have to agree.
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of touch on this now because we're already speaking about it. But for a lot of folks, like you said, they might hear this and go, okay, well, like, what's the big deal? Just don't use the app. Like, just stop using the app. And I think it's natural to feel that way, particularly if you're not using an app. Like, there's tons of apps I don't use, and I'll be like, well, you don't need that. But there's a wrinkle here. Like you said, Minji, it is part of your job. Like, Zach, it's part of your job. But also, this is people's livelihoods even when they don't work for a company, right? People do make money by being influencers on this platform. And so I think there's two things here. Like, can you help folks understand how just getting off of the app isn't actually attainable, both for folks who make a living through it, but also for folks who, like, right, it's not even a living. Like, this is where their friends are. It's like telling them to stop seeing their friends in high school. I wanted to see if we could press on that and see why is just stop using the app not actually actionable advice.
We have a colleague here that works at Malwarebytes, and one of the ways they use TikTok is to be part of a community, right? So they're part of a community with for children with like allergies, right? So that content that they consume on TikTok is shared knowledge from other people within this community that are sharing tips on what they do to avoid allergies, do this, not that kind of stuff. Here are some easy food substitutions you can make. Think of the way that maybe, I'm assuming the people listening to this podcast maybe are more familiar with like Reddit, right? There are certain subreddits you go to that are essentially groups and you share knowledge or you share interests and things like that. Some of those exist. Like being able to produce that content in a video format is a unique way to share expertise and information and consume whatever it is on that subject, right? So those people then are suddenly, if you say, okay, great, like don't use TikTok, don't dance on TikTok, right? Like there are so many other ways people use this platform that now they are completely locked out of, right? Not to mention you've got entire businesses. These content creators run businesses. You might think of like influencer work as silly and trivial, but they are businesses, right? They have business models, they have P&L statements, right? Like they run small businesses. And so imagine if you wake up tomorrow and your main distribution platform is taken away from your business, and you have to figure out, okay, what do I do now, right? And you might think, okay, well, there's other video platforms. You could just create YouTube content, you could create Instagram content, but the way the TikTok algorithm works, the way these communities are formed on TikTok, the way that your content, let alone like the revenue dollars that you can generate on TikTok, but the way that your content gets into the feeds of other people is very unique on TikTok than it is on the other two platforms. So losing that leg of the stool, so to speak, is crippling for small businesses.
Yeah, and also I just kind of want to piggyback off of this too, but a lot of the younger generation, they go to TikTok as a source of news even, right? So because TikTok has become a huge news source for them, a lot of stories just don't get covered by mainstream outlets. So they turn to social media and specifically TikTok to just kind of fill in those gaps. So yeah, I mean, now with the whole algorithmic control and censorship and government pressure, it's where are they going to go? It just takes away that source and kind of sucks.
You touched on this in the intro, David. You mentioned the sentiment around, well, if China's taking my data, I would rather give my data directly to China than let some billionaire sell it and make money off of it, right? Especially this breaks down generationally, right? But there is this intense distrust of big tech and this intense distrust of billionaires that people who sort of share that sentiment land on TikTok as a platform, right? And so if you're mad about Meta selling your information during that Cambridge Analytica situation, right? There are people who are going to say, okay, Meta, you have played your hand. You are the biggest source of my data being used for purposes that I don't agree to. I'm going to go to this other platform and I'm going to use that platform instead. And it doesn't matter what those dangers are in terms of your data and where it's going and how it's being used, because all I know as a user is it's not being used by the people who have proven that they're going to misuse my data. So when TikTok was originally banned in 2025, everybody, and you can go, it's really funny to kind of go back and look at some of this content, but TikTok was banned and brands and users are all asking, okay, where do we go? One of the biggest recipients of that traffic back then wasn't Instagram, it was Rednote. It was another Chinese owned short form video platform. So like people again are making the conscious decision not to give their data and information and access to a US company, but to say, okay, you know what? You've played your hand. I'm going to play mine, and I'm going to go sign up for another Chinese-owned platform out of spite, essentially.
I remember that week, and I remember seeing folks learning Mandarin and Cantonese and recording videos, and it was people who were having a lot of fun with it, and they were just reciting things where they're like, look, I'm an American TikTok refugee almost,
right.
Please take me in. I'm seeking viewership and page views. And it's the silliest, dumbest stuff, but I do think it reveals again this animosity that is happening towards American tech companies, towards American billionaires. And I wanted to follow up on that. Where is this distrust coming from, and is it valid? And what I'm actually asking is, what are we vulnerable to? If a company has our data, if Facebook has our data, it does. If Instagram has our data, it does. What are we vulnerable to? And is that what folks are so angry about? So what's the threat? What's the threat of any company having this data?
I think there are two things, right? There's sort of a practical, what you would see every day, and then there are a lot of theoreticals, right? So on a day-to-day level, the threat is you are going to be advertised to on deeply personal levels, right? These companies are going to use your information, and they are going to, you could describe this relationship in a lot of different ways, but essentially these social media platforms are going to use what they know about you to help advertisers put ads in front of you that they think you are going to buy from or otherwise engage with, right? Okay, Zach, cool. They're gonna sell ads. I don't have to buy anything. But the problem is these ads can either be from reputable companies who are just looking to gain new customers, or these platforms let anybody advertise. There are drop shippers and other types of businesses that you can spin up very quickly that may or may not be legitimate. You as a user don't know. You just get a attractive ad in your feed that maybe was made by AI in 30 seconds. And you are then giving your credit card information and your address and all this other personal information to make a purchase from some site. You'll notice this a lot if you ever scroll your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed. You could do this on any platform, but for me, it's very visible on Facebook. You will get ads from companies you've heard of that you know to be reputable, and you will get ads for like screen printed t-shirts that have these really sort of like banal slogans on them or whatever, right? Because it takes like that, like they are getting information about you and your habits and where you work and the type of activities you're interested in, and they have this slop business. And again, it's really easy to hear that and say, well, like, don't click those ads, but like human beings will click these and they will make purchases, and those people are giving information away to fly-by-night companies that may or may not be storing that data appropriately, or may or may not be fulfilling, like you think you're purchasing an item from this company, but you're not. It's a scam. They're keeping your money and then they go take off with it. So I think on a practical level, the advertising piece is the biggest. The other thing is, I'll pick on Discord here just a little bit, right? Because this is very visible. We've seen this really recently. So Discord and many other tech companies are under a lot of pressure to collect information about their users, right? So they have to verify your identification to make sure that you are able to access the content that you are accessing, right? Theoretically, this is under the guise of protecting minors from content that they shouldn't be exposed to. But the challenge is now this other entity, Pornhub, Discord, whomever, has information on you. And in the case of Discord, they did suffer a data breach recently, right? So these companies that are in charge of holding your data breaches happen to anybody. And any company on earth can tell you horror stories about, access to data that shouldn't happen or some sort of cybersecurity incident. These things happen. And so when you have single entities that own very, very sensitive information on you, you are creating a relationship of trust. You are trusting that business to protect your data and to keep it safe. And the reality is they can't.
Yeah, it's influence without any kind of transparency. It's very concerning. I mean, touching back on ads and how Zach mentioned that he gets hit with it on Facebook, it's the same on Instagram as well too, right? Everyone says, oh yeah, whatever you're talking about, whatever you're thinking about, oh my gosh, all of a sudden here comes an ad on your feed, and it's pretty wild to think about the surveillance. So I mean, whether it's a Chinese corporation or American investors or any kind of other like entity, it's just the centralized control over our personal data and just all that information. It just creates the same structural vulnerability. It's wild.
You both touch on something that leads right into our next question, which is away from Chinese or American ownership, away from whatever billionaire is at the top of this structure. Who should have this data?
I would say no one, but the answer is
Yeah.
is you. You are the only one who, quote unquote, owns this data. This is your data. Listen, there are very legitimate things you're going to, if you need to order something, you're going to need to give a company your address, right? If you need to refill a prescription online and then go pick it up, you're going to need to put in some information to be able to do that. That's understandable. But to be wholesale databased by every company you've ever had any sort of encounter with is troubling. And users should be the ones, individual people should be the ones who are in control and ownership of that data.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that TikTok said that it might collect user data such as, your race, your national origin, religious beliefs, even down to your sexual orientation, sexual life, and mental health diagnosis, that's pretty concerning. And I do not feel comfortable giving that information to any corporation, any business at all. And, even beyond that, right? So just touching on Discord too, and how rolling out age verification, that's important. But the fact that you have to upload your government ID and even provide AI facial scanning, that's too much. That's a bit extra.
Yeah. I also think it's important to go back quickly to how you both were talking about the quality of ads and the lack of quality, and essentially what folks see online is crap, right? Like we can just
Yeah, totally.
we can call it
Totally.
like, hey,
Yeah.
there's just a bunch of crap, right? And there's always this story I tell about data brokers. We had a fellow come on the show like last year talking about how location data was collected by data brokers of folks who were visiting oncology clinics. And so it was very likely that they or someone they loved was being treated for cancer. And those individuals received ads about cancer treatments. And so part one is, I think that's a deep invasion of privacy, right? I think that's dreadful and I think it's terribly wrong. But part two is some of the advertisements they got were for scam treatments of cancer, right? Things that do not provably work, things that there is no medical basis for. And so there's part one, the privacy invasion, but part two is I'm just receiving crap. I'm receiving crap. I'm receiving stuff that could be dangerous, things that if I poured my money into it, I could die. Like that's it. It's a ridiculous and stupid and dreadful infrastructure that we've built up that rewards an invasion of privacy with like wasted dollars for medical treatment. Like this is what it is. This is what data collection leads to. I also know that this is probably impossible to prove, but I did also want to ask, we were talking so much about what are we vulnerable to, when this data is collected, who should have this data, who should not have this data. And when we were talking about the dots that are being connected between, these words are being removed, this name is being removed, any reference of ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement is being removed. Is there any evidence that TikTok is now running essentially like an American government influence operation, or that they are receiving direction from the American government? It's impossible to not ask this question because, again, the dots are there. So what can we say about that?
It might mean that truly any neutral digital platform or space, they're disappearing, right?
It's really difficult if you want to operate as a business within the US. You have to follow laws and legislation passed in the US, right? So sometimes these companies are at the mercy of whatever regulation is passed, and they have to follow those laws. So, for example, TikTok in this case, they have to collect your immigration status, right? They have to collect that kind of data. And part of that is because of California legislation that they have to collect that information, right? So there are things like that happen, but then there are so many, kind of going back to our conspiracy conversation, right? Like, is it provable? No, but there are just so many coincidences that it's very easy for someone to sort of come to that conclusion. Here's the hard thing though. These platforms, Minji, I think you nailed this when you said like the idea of a neutral digital space is disappearing, right? Like there are so few of those now. Like if we go back to when we were teenagers using the internet, every space was that. Every space was the idea of the internet being a private, free space that was ingrained in its creation, and every platform since then sort of carried that spirit with it. And now, either due to legislation or due to greed or or some other reason, those spaces are disappearing, and it's very difficult to just go like a cat video that your friend sent you, right? Like it's very difficult to have a social interaction on a social media platform without it being a tool for selling you something or harvesting your data or some nefarious purpose like that.
We've been circling around something here that I think is really important to talk about. So I wanted to close on like this big last question here about spaces that remain for ourselves online. And so, right, in just the past 5 years, I think we've seen the manipulation and collapse of a lot of popular sites, right? Elon Musk has transformed Twitter into X, and X rewards paying users. It allows state-controlled media. It pushes its AI tool Grok, which is currently being investigated for its creation of sexualized imagery of minors. Elsewhere last year, we saw parenting forums, green living forums, forums about pet care. They all shut down because of compliance requirements with the UK Online Safety Act. And this month, we were talking about Discord, right? Announcing its rolling out of age verification that could rely on uploading government documents. All of these things, to me, in short form, right, their influence. It's editorial influence, it's government influence, it's corporate advertising influence. And so what I wanted to ask here is, what does it mean when we cannot live online without influence?
It's such a tough one. There are so many ways that privacy is being eroded online. There are so many ways that these neutral digital spaces are disappearing. What I would say is this is a winnable fight. This is something that if we all decide collectively that the internet should stay free and our data is our data, it is owned by individuals, not by companies, then that is something that people can do. If you go back to the Super Bowl and everybody saw that Ring ad, right, where they're talking about like looking for lost dogs with this like eye in the sky network, right? Ring got so much, and when I say Ring, Amazon got so much pushback from that they canceled that. That program doesn't exist anymore, right? And if one is cynical, one may say, well, it'll just come back under a different name with a different partner, and they'll they just won't tell you when they do it, but they're still going to do it, right? But that's an example of people having a voice and using it to make a real difference. And so if data privacy is important to you, like it is to us, and if you're listening to this podcast, I have to assume data privacy is important to you. If it's not, like I'm sorry, I don't know what you clicked on. We just
welcome to the show.
Yeah. But if that is something that is important to you, advocate for that. You can call your people that are in charge of making these laws. You can make a difference on this. And I know it feels so hopeless, and I know, going back to people at the beginning that are sort of like, well, whatever, they're going to take my data. Who cares? It's all on the internet anyway. What's the point anymore? I would encourage people not to give in and not to feel defeated, because the internet can be private and free to access for everyone. And we don't have to feel like this is a requirement for being online, because it doesn't have to be. A tip that I really love, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I really recommend anybody who doesn't do this to start doing this. Any platform that you can lie to, you should lie to them, right? Like if there's a company you do business with, or if there's a service you use, let's say they ask you for your name and they're not like mailing you something, tell them you're Bob Vila. Like it doesn't matter. Like give them fake data, create a birthday. Like you don't have to give them your birthday. Like maybe they give you something on your birthday, you get a free whatever, but even in that scenario, do you really want that? Like you probably don't. Give these companies fake information, give them a fake birthday, give them a fake name, give them a fake address if they don't really need your address. Like, and you'll notice when you start getting emails from these companies, when they call you by a fake name, you know exactly what this is, right? Like give these companies fake data. And then again, the other side of that too is, if one of these companies is to experience a data breach and your information, quote unquote, gets leaked, then it's fake information. You've not given them anything substantial. Now, again, of course, obviously, like some companies, you're going to need to give them some level of information to, interact with them in some way. But like if there's a business that does not need your address, give them a fake address by all means. Like give them a fake name, give them fake emails, like whatever it is. Like don't use real information wherever possible.
Yeah, don't fall for it. Don't fall for that free shipping or that give your email and your birthday away for 10% off. Just don't do it. Just lie.
10% is nothing.
At the end of the day, we're just looking for transparency in how our data is being used by these businesses or corporations, or just in general. We just need transparency.
Do you think it would be okay, because there is a world here in which influence, right? We invite, obviously, the term influencer, right? And so social media is filled with influencers. And you bring up this idea here of transparency, that it's different than being influenced by what we know. I kind of want to just dig into that a little bit. Is it different that I go on a platform and I see someone hawking like protein powder? Is that different from, TikTok knows my location, age, sex, political affiliation? Are they different? I feel like they are, but how are they different? And what role does transparency have, and why is it important?
I think the biggest difference for me is that in the example of like the ads you get served, right? You can see an ad and make an assessment on that company And you can do research, you can do your due diligence, you can look up reviews, you could ask friends if they have heard of this company, if they've bought from this company. You can go on YouTube and look up reviews, right? Like there are a million different ways for you to kind of do your due diligence and make a purchasing decision, right? In the case of platforms controlling, the idea of choice goes away, right? You don't get to make a decision anymore on whether to engage in that type of content or not engage in that content, or engage with that content, or make a purchasing decision or not make a purchasing decision. Like that decision has been made for you, and existing on this platform means that you receive whatever somebody else has decided is important for you to see. So I think in one scenario, users have a choice and they can exercise decision-making skills, and in the other, you can't.
Yeah, it's that fine line between influence and just complete control, right?
It's very interesting here. We're talking about platforms taking control and removing choice. And we're talking about user agency as a form of to be perfectly honest, I do think that user agency is a form of privacy. Like I think the freedom to choose who you want to be, I think that's a form of privacy. The freedom to choose what you share and don't share, who you tell and don't tell. All of these things, I think, again, privacy is the implementation of choice. I think it's a kind of wonderful way to look at it. But also, it is very much related to scams. Like scams and scammers are trying to short circuit your choice.
Yeah.
They're trying to push you into something that you typically wouldn't do. They're using urgency. They're faking who they are. They're impersonating. They're saying there's an emergency when there is none. All of this is to say the removal of choice is a harm that manifests in many different ways, whether, again, it's falling for a scam, or it's being served up an ad, or it's being removed from the option of saying who you are in the way that you want to. And so just to wrap it up, yeah, you guys should care about choice. That's it. You should probably care about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the internet doesn't exist without it.
Yeah, just read what you're agreeing to, because it's a lot more than what we assume, right? It's bad. It's scary out there.
Zach, Minji, I wanted to thank you again for coming on today's show.
Thank you again so much for having us. This was a blast and a fun and very important topic to cover, especially lately in these days. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, David.
To our listeners, we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Until then, stay tuned and stay safe. And remember, you can read all our cybersecurity coverage on Malwarebytes Labs at malwarebytes.com/blog. Finally, our intro music is by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com, and our outro music is by Woa from unminus.com. Today's show has been edited by our podcast consultant, Eric Johnson, at lightningpod.fm. Thank you, folks.